Greetings to everyone watching. For the Mental Health Awareness campaign of 500 Women Scientists, we are here talking about the mental health crisis in STEM. We're asking the important questions and having the crucial conversations. Today, I have the great pleasure of talking to Syrita Steib, who is a Democratic candidate for US Senate representing Louisiana. She's the founder and executive director of Operation Restoration, a nonprofit that creates opportunities for formerly incarcerated women. She has served as co-chair of Healthy Families Committee for New Orleans and was the vice chair of Louisiana Task Force on Women's Incarceration. Hi, Syrita. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be in conversation with you today.
Thank you. Could you tell us a bit more about yourself, please?
Now you're going to make me blush. Now you're going to make me blush. I hate talking about myself, but yeah, I am also a clinical laboratory scientist, and this is how I got into the 500 Women Scientists Fellowship. It was all STEMmed and based in when I was released from prison, there weren't a lot of opportunities as it related to school and job options. I found myself having to be dishonest about going to school and just so I could get in. And once I got in, of course, my passions have always been in STEM. Prior to my incarceration, my major was physics and engineering. And after I got out, I was saying I was going to medical school. So for me, it's always been STEM, and I've always been super interested in STEM. So I found a program at LSU Health and Science Center called Clinical Laboratory Science. In the hospitals, we're known as medical technologists. And that is what my degree is in. But my trajectory started as a lab assistant. I was a licensed lab assistant in the state of Louisiana while I was going through school. And what I learned is that that was an easy trajectory into the field of clinical pathology inside of the hospital. And I thought that because the career had a lot of upward mobility and trajectory, that other women who are formerly incarcerated could definitely follow the same path if it was of interest to them. And we all know, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, that really highlighted and exacerbated the need for laboratory personnel in the hospitals. And it just highlighted the shortage that everybody who's in the profession knew already existed. So we designed here at Operation Restoration a program to help currently and formerly incarcerated women become certified and licensed lab assistants in the state of Louisiana. So we're getting ready to start our first cohort inside of the prison, and we're on our second cohort outside of prison. And it's a partnership between us, local hospitals, as well as the Board of Medical Examiners here in Louisiana to move these women into sustainable careers that have an upward trajectory.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's dive into the questions I have for you today. There is an indubitable mental health crisis in science and STEM fields, which requires immediate action. Women scientists and minorities in STEM are especially susceptible to these crises. What are your perspectives on this?
Great question. I think that for me, we all know that, mental health, there's a mental health crisis across this nation currently, right now, with all of the things that people are facing, specifically around the violence against Black and Brown people, the COVID-19 pandemic, the shortages in the workforce. I mean, you name it. There are reasons that people's mental health are being strained. But I think what we don't necessarily highlight or talk about is that there are certain disciplines and certain fields, STEM specifically, where mental health is already challenged, much like in, we see it in police officers and doctors and just any field that there is a smaller representation of Black and Brown people, a smaller representation of gender. We know that the folks who are in the smaller population or representative population also are exposed to extreme distress and are often singled out, are often have to work longer hours, or prove more, or work harder. And I think that in no place else other than STEM, it is extremely highlighted that, minorities, and, when I'm speaking of minorities, I'm definitely speaking of Black and Brown people and women specifically, that because we are traditionally not thought of in these fields, are thought of and contributing to these fields, when we do join the STEM fields, we are subject to extreme mental stress due to our being. So things that we can't control. And I think that, we have to begin to have more conversations, not just about like DEI and everyone gets a DEI officer, but really becoming intentional about how the lack of DEI is also affecting mental health, and what are some tangible things that we can do about it to not only increase the representation, but the people that are represented in these fields that are a part of minority class, how are we supporting them and instituting a culture that mental health is important.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. What have been some of the personal and proximal struggles that you have experienced or witnessed in terms of mental health?
I know for me, I worked in a particular hospital setting, and I was the only African-American tech that worked during the day at this hospital. And the things that you endure, like it's already, I was working in immunohematology. So you're already in high stress when you're working in a setting where you're responsible for blood transfusion, organ transfusion, stem cell, you name it, any product that a person needs to live that has to be infused into their body. We actually tested and did everything that needed to be done for those blood products. And so that's already stressful, that's already a high stress environment. But then to come in and have to be also targeted because I am a Black woman working in this space. So if the political climate is, extremely tense, I have to be exposed to the politics of race every single day. So I walk in the break room and certain news stations are on that are spewing hate in the break room. And, we're not supposed to talk about church and politics or, whatever at work, but to have those conversations continuously happen all day for an 8-hour period while you're at work, knowing that these beliefs are targeting who I am as an individual. So that begins to play on your mental health. You think about working in a high stressful situation, now also being targeted, having to make sure you're crossing all your T's and dotting your I's, on top of being able to do your job and execute it in the way that you should. And then I'm formerly incarcerated. So now there's also chatter about me being in prison and people trying to use that against me, in certain situations. Anytime that I got a promotion, that would come up. If I'm managing people, the whispers behind the scenes are happening. So, I think that when you are in these situations, you're already second guessed because you're a Black or brown person and your word is not valid. You have to perform above and beyond and continue to prove your intelligence and how smart you are and why you need to be taken seriously. So that is just, if your skin tone is different, right? Or you're a different color. But then to be a woman on top of that, there's that added level. Then to be formerly incarcerated on top of that, there's another level. And then to be the only person of color, it's another level. So I think that, we have to begin to talk about these struggles publicly and share these struggles, because if we don't talk about it and it is contained to these small environments, then the behavior is going to continue to perpetuate itself in these environments because no one is being brought in to recognize that these things are going on. So that is why I speak about it, I talk about it, because it's not easy being in that situation. And you shouldn't have to be extremely strong and resilient to go to work every day.
Absolutely. I think that you brought some very pertinent perspectives to this talk, and there are certainly so many layers that need to be unveiled when we talk about the mental health crisis. The final question I have for you today is, do you have any advice for prioritizing and ameliorating mental health for women scientists and minorities in STEM?
Absolutely. I think that we all have to begin to rally around one another. You know, oftentimes when it's more than one woman in, you know, a field of STEM and you're working together in an office, we're often pitted against one another to be in competition with, whether that's for promotions, recognition, you know, fellowships or grants or whatever. There's never a spirit of collaboration that is built between two women who are working in the same place. So being a woman in STEM and recognizing another woman in STEM, like us as women, have to make it our business to support one another and work in a spirit of collaboration so we can begin to diffuse the mental strain that we are both under. And how do you share that mental strain? How do you talk about it together? How do you fellowship together around it? I think that a lot of times we just work with our head down, and if it doesn't apply to me, I'm going to leave it alone because you feel like your job is on the line, or your reputation or your research or whatever it may be will come into question if you pair up with this other woman who's under attack. But as women in STEM, and it being so important and imperative that we, even though the numbers are smaller, we begin to band together and support one another. I think that I have a personal motto, and it just says that I do not compete with Black women. And that means if I walk in a room and there's a Black woman in the room and she's fighting for her place and her space, I have made a personal decision to support her through that and not fight her through it, right? So making sure that every time that I, Syrita, show up in a space where there's another woman from STEM, or we're in a STEM setting or whatever setting that I am in capacity that I am representing at the time, is that I always want to come with a spirit of collaboration and never a spirit of competition. And always saying, hey, you know, we're both here and I support you. And how can we work together? So I think that if us as women take that stance collectively, what we will begin to see is an uptake in the mental health of women in STEM and people of color in STEM, because the reason it is so strenuous and like mentally straining is because we're all suffering it in isolation.